Okay, we're just a couple of minutes after 6 here. I want to thank everybody who's joining us at home to watch our webinar. We're building together the ADU insights from city staff in San Anselmo, Fairfax, and Mill Valley. I'm your host tonight. I'm Scott Johnson. I'm the director of the ADU Center, and we are a nonprofit that's working with the county and many of the cities in the county to help homeowners understand and get started with their ADU projects. And so, with that, I will talk a little bit about who we are as an organization and how we are doing our work in Marin. And we have the webinars being managed by Amity Armstrong, our technical wizard, who's going to be dropping links in the chat for further information about some of the topics that we cover. And then once we go through the quick intro of the ADU Center, we'll introduce all the panelists we're going to have with us tonight, the staff that has seen so many ADUs over the last 4 years. And we'll be discussing ADUs. There's a question and answer option here that you can type in your questions for city staff, and then we will do answers at the end. And if there are any answers that we don't get to at the end, we'll try and follow up via email. So with that, uh, again, I'm Scott. I'm with the ADU Center, and we are a nonprofit that has been working in Napa and Sonoma counties for the last 4 years, helping homeowners understand the ADU process. And we've just started working in Marin, and we're excited to be here and to help Marin homeowners wrap their heads around what can be kind of a daunting and complex process. And we've been updating the tools at adumarin.org. Adumarin.org is the website where you can get a workbook, download an PDF workbook that walks you through all the things to think about in the pre-construction process of building an ADU. You're able to look at there's a calculator available on the website that helps you understand the types of construction costs and permitting costs for building the ADU process. It also helps you calculate what kind of financing you might get and what the rents would be in your area for those kinds of ADUs, and help you understand the financial model and impact of building an ADU in Marin. We also are starting, we have just started 2 weeks ago, doing one-on-one consultations with homeowners in Marin, where you can sign up and talk with me or one of our ADU experts here and really understand your particular property, your particular goals and budget and what your project could look like, and talk you through the different options and the things that you may be wanting to consider early on before you're talking with an architect or working with a prefab company. We really try and want to give you the ability to make the best start that you can, and an informed decision about your ADU project. So that's some of the stuff we have to offer, and I'd say keep looking at adumarin.org as we're updating the tools all the time. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted there shortly after, probably before the end of the week. So anyone who misses it, or if you want to share it with anyone, you can either go to adumarin.org or go to our YouTube channel at the ADU Center to watch this webinar again. So one of the things as we move forward, we've got city planners from Fairfax, Mill Valley, and San Anselmo. We've got Jeff Beiswinger, who's the Planning and Building Services Director, Bert McKillop, who's their housing specialist, and Kara Spencer, their assistant planner. We've got Daisy Allen, who's the senior planner at Mill Valley, and Lindsay Klein, senior planner at San Anselmo. And all of these folks have seen a lot in the ADUs come through their doors and are able to give us some insights of what they've seen and how ADUs get built in their cities. And I want to stress that we're focusing on the permitting part of the ADU process. This page here, this is what we call our process map for the whole ADU project, from thinking about your ADU, talking to professionals, working on sketches, talking with the city, getting it designed, built, permitted, operating. We're talking kind of about the middle section where you're working with the city and having that, understanding the permitting process and understanding the rules for your property. So things like, how to find an architect or cost of construction is something that we're not going to be talking about tonight. We will have future webinars about those topics, and we really want to focus on interacting with the city and what the permit process looks like. So with that, we can bring our attendees in, and I kind of want to start with some of the basics so thank you all for joining me tonight. And I'm going to call on Daisy first and ask her to summarize what are the ADU rules in Mill Valley.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Scott, and happy to be here. Daisy Allen, Senior Planner of City of Mill Valley. So Mill Valley, in general, we've adopted an ADU ordinance that meets the minimum requirements of the state law and does not go really beyond that. Um, so what that means is we limit our ADU height on detached ADUs to 16 feet, unless you're over a garage, in which case we allow ADUs up to 25 feet. For attached ADUs, you can go up to 25 feet. That's a newer addition to state law recently. Um, and then we have maximum sizes for our ADUs of 800 square feet, 850, or 1,000, depending on the type of ADU and your existing square footage on your property. Um, we have 3 tiers of approval for ADUs. The first one is a building permit only approval, and most of our ADUs that come in are that type of ADU, where people are coming in for what we call a by right ADU. Um, that's a maximum size of 800 square feet, meeting all of the other zoning requirements. And by state law, we need to allow those types of ADUs with a building permit only. The next tier is something called an ADU permit, which is a very minor type of permit that we process quickly through our department, but it is an additional layer on top of the building permit. And then for projects that are not meeting our ADU standards, they want to do something that's outside of our usual standards, we require something called design review, and that goes to our zoning administrator for a public hearing. And so that's kind of in a nutshell, and I'll leave it to others to go now.
Yeah, thank you. And that's something that I'm sure we'll harp on again with ADUs in this tonight is that in our experience, almost every ADU can be an edge case. And so there are the general rules, and that's kind of where we're going to be at tonight for the most part. And if you're curious about ADU on your property, talk with the city, talk with the planners, talk with us at the ADU center, and we can get more into the details about what's possible and what's likely. Um, Lindsay, San Anselmo, do you want to sort of how is your ordinance any different from Mill Valley's in that?
Thank you, and hi, everyone. Yes, I think San Anselmo's ordinance sounds very similar to Mill Valley. We very similarly kind of implement what state law describes for the most part. I think I'll just add that basic setback requirements for most ADUs, you just have 4-foot side and rear yard setbacks for ADUs in San Anselmo. And then instead of the 3-tier system that Mill Valley has, we have a 2-tier system. So our first tier is really that building permit. That's that by right easy process that just goes to the building department. And then the next level is a conditional use permit. And that is a planning department permit. And that conditional use permit essentially can be sought by anyone who wants to deviate from the basic ADU standards that Daisy was mentioning, such as the height limits, the size limits, or the setback limits. A couple other just requirements to identify are adherence to the building code. So that can get really detailed and nuanced quickly. So I won't delve into that, but just, when you're going in to talk to the town of San Anselmo, definitely talk to the building official about adhering to the building code. And then there's also fire department regulations. So for San Anselmo, that's talking to the Ross Valley Fire Department. If you're in a wildland urban interface area, you'll want to make sure that you're meeting the fire hardening requirements. So those are the basic things for San Anselmo.
Yeah. And then for Fairfax, who wants to take the Fairfax ordinance question?
I can do that. So I'm Kara Spencer. I'm the assistant planner with Fairfax, and I process the ADU applications that come in. And just like San Anselmo and Mill Valley, we have a similar system. We adhere to all the state requirements. We do have a couple of differences. One being that we do allow 2 ADUs on a single family lot as long as it is a minimum of 10,000 square feet. So we do allow two detached, excuse me, I should clarify, two detached ADUs. So that's a little bit different. We also allow those to be up to 1,200 square feet.
Wow, nice.
Yeah,
Uh,
so that pretty much the same. Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah.
and I'll add, Scott, that I mean, I know we're primarily probably have homeowners on right now, but we did recently amend the code to allow ADUs in commercial zones as well. So anyway, that's a little bit different than other jurisdictions.
And that's really interesting. I mean, we see, when the state law passed in 2020 and all the updates over the last 4 years, the state is sort of the baseline. The state law is the baseline, and that's often what a lot of the information and online is about, is sort of the, up to 1,200 square feet or 1,000 square feet, and one junior ADU and one regular ADU per parcel. We'll talk about juniors in a little bit, I suspect. But that's why I think it's so important for homeowners who are thinking about an ADU to understand, like, that's the baseline, but cities can do slightly different things or allow for more ADUs per parcel if they meet certain conditions. And so it really is important early on for folks to start talking with the city, talk with planners, and reach out and start to understand what their individual jurisdiction rules are, because they can be slightly different from what the state standard is, and they're often better, more allow for more options than what just the basic state standard is. And I also want to jump to something that Lindsay sort of brought up, was other agencies. One thing that I often talk with homeowners about is that cities are not monoliths. They're individual departments, and each department has their own area of expertise and area of control, area of interest, I guess I'll say. And when you're doing an ADU project, it's more than a remodel. It's more than even like a bedroom addition. You are building, as a homeowner, you're building a second legal residence in California, and that touches a lot of agencies outside planning and building. And so, Lindsay, you mentioned fire. We've often heard about sewer districts and water districts. PG&E is involved, obviously, and it's important for homeowners to start to look around and figure out what other agencies are going to be involved, and how that might affect their project. And obviously, the planning department is the great place to start, but there are other places that they're also going to need to get information from. I think fire, especially, here we are in California with the wildfires that we have. Fire is critically important, and understanding which fire district you're in, which fire marshal that you're going to need to be talking to about your project, is something that homeowners can be doing long before they talk to an architect or a contractor.
And we always request that kind of early consultation with Ross Valley Fire. That's our fire district, because that tends to be one place where a lot of ADUs run into issues, because we have a lot of narrow winding roads that may not be wide enough, and we also have steep lots with lots of trees. You might need fire sprinklers. You might not have enough water pressure. So there's a bunch of different fire related concerns that just want to resolve kind of upfront before you get too far down the road, just so you know what you're getting into. So
yeah, that's a really great point. And I think two things there. Some of the things that make Marin so gorgeous, you've got the steep slopes, you've got a lot of wooded areas, and you often have where you don't have those, they're often floodplains. And I know that for a lot of areas in Mill Valley, San Anselmo, and Fairfax, tree removal permits, these can be an issue for an ADU if you're putting one in your backyard and you've got a wooded lot and it's a steep lot. I think probably height and things like tree removal permits, these other, not necessarily ADU related, but city rule related issues, the sooner that, as a homeowner, the sooner you can find out about those, the better the better experience you're going to have in building your ADU. The more the expectations are going to be set. And is it Daisy? Were you the one who was talking to me about tree removal permits?
Yeah, so in Mill Valley, we require a tree removal permit if you're removing a heritage tree, which is considered a redwood or an oak over a certain diameter, or if you're removing 3 or more of any kind of tree that's over 6 inches diameter. So a lot of times an ADU project will come in on a wooded lot, and the applicant will think, oh, it's just a by right ADU, it's 800 square feet, and wait, hold on a second. Yes, but you need to get a tree removal permit first, and that might delay your project by a couple of months because you have to go through that process, and it's a zoning administrator public hearing requirement.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
And are there often the arborist reports, or are there documentation needed to be done to apply for that permit?
Yes, for a tree removal permit, you do need an arborist report. And then we sometimes do peer reviews of those reports, depending on how complicated the project is or contentious. So it's certainly a bit of work involved in those applications.
Right. Right. I
And,
think
can I add something to, so Fairfax has a tree committee, so we have a similar process, so there, we don't, there's no fee to go to our tree committee, but if you need to get a tree removed, you have to go to them, and it's a public hearing as well, so it's another step that you have to take before you would build your project, so yeah.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that we often see where it's not the ADU process necessarily, but the changes required by the ADU often trigger other issues, and those permits and those committees, I mean, that's a primary reason why Marin has such gorgeous trees, because they have been protected. There is a process there to review what's happening, what changes are happening. And so there is a benefit from having that process there. But if you're not ready for it, it can be shocking if you're a homeowner thinking, oh yeah, by right ADU, no problem. I'll just take out this redwood. No one's going to care about it. Unfortunately, there does need to be, I think, some control over that, and that's fairly common. Um, WUI and fire code things. I know we don't have the fire department here, so this will be, in general, but are there easy ways for homeowners to figure out, are they in the wildland urban interface? Are they in a high fire zone? Who should they be talking to figure out kind of those basic first steps about learning about their property?
So the Ross Valley Fire Department has their WUI maps on their website. So you can, I don't know the specific page, but you can go to the Ross Valley Fire Department and you can download the maps and figure out if you're in a WUI zone. So and
Probably good to know, even if you're not going to build an ADU. And I think, Jeff, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and generally speaking, if you're on the flat, so to speak, if you're down kind of close to Sir Francis Drake Drive, then you might not be in the WUI, but if you're on any sort of hillside, you're most definitely going to be in the WUI. So most of Fairfax is probably in it versus not in it.
right.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. Mhm.
Our downtown core, kind of where our commercial area is, generally not in it, and maybe a few residential neighborhoods next to it, but most of it is, yes.
Right. And that can have effect on both design, in terms of, there's a part of the building called Chapter 7A, which is all about fire resistant construction. And if you're in the WUI, or, you're in a high fire risk area, that can often have significant effects on what you're allowed to design, what you have to build with, the technology involved in putting together the house. And so again, as with everything else that we're going to talk about tonight, the earlier that you understand that that's a restriction or that's a requirement, the smoother your design process and permitting process is going to go. And we talked a little bit about slope. ADU height and slope is something I think Marin in particular, and your three cities in particular, can struggle with, because the limit is 16 feet. And while that's plenty for a single story on the flat, how have you often seen that play out on sloped sites?
Well, so we measure ADU height in like a plumb line measurement from the top of the highest roof pitch to the bottom of the lowest exposed foundation. So if you're on a steep slope, it can be difficult to meet that 16-foot height requirement. So what we've seen is sometimes for those types of projects, they end up needing to go to that design review level of approval in order to move forward.
So there is a path forward, which is nice.
There's a path forward. Yeah, we allow ADUs to, we don't require variances which it's a much higher bar on requesting a variance from code, but we allow ADUs that don't meet our code requirements to get something called an exception through design review. And the findings that we need to make to approve those types of projects are just compliance with our single family design guidelines. So it's much more about the aesthetics of the project. So as long as the project is, well designed, there's not major neighbor impacts, there should be a path forward.
Right. Great. Lindsay?
Yeah, I'll just note for San Anselmo that our measurement of height is a little bit different. So we measure height based on the average. So you look at the ground that the building is covering, and you take the highest point and the lowest point of that footprint, and you take the average of those to the peak. So that tends to give a little bit more flexibility in terms of what the height limit ends up being for ADUs in San Anselmo. But I will note that one of the unique things about San Anselmo's regulations is a detached garage with an ADU attached to that is considered a detached ADU per the town's regulations. So sometimes people try to stack them to try to utilize that space that's kind of created above or below the garage. And if the total combined area of that exceeds 16 feet in height, that's when you can run into issues. And you have to go from a building permit to a conditional use permit path to approval, which is, once again, doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just a different path to approval.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's great. And I think it's worth noting here that with I think floodplain, WUI, fire zoning, all those kinds of things, homeowners can actually do some research on their property themselves. Marin, all the Marin jurisdictions are part of the Marin Map GIS website, which is a great resource. It's something we use here when we're looking at pre-screening for people who want to do consults with us. You can look up your property, you can see your zone, you can often see if you're in a special district, and get a lot of basic information about your own property from this website. And I think yes, so I see Amity is dropping these links in the chat. So these are great ways to start doing your sort of your due diligence for your own project at home by getting this information. And then when you're talking to city staff, you already know, okay, I already know the zone, I know if I'm in the floodplain or not. That can help speed up conversations as well. What are there other steps that you have seen from all the ADUs that have come through, other steps that you would recommend for homeowners to take early in the process, in the pre-construction process? Things that might help them get more information or say make less mistakes, but have a better understanding of their ADU program early on.
Well, we always recommend people to come in during our counter hours if they're able to, because there's nothing that beats having a conceptual plan and going through it with a planner at the counter if you have that luxury of time to be able to do that. Because there's always something that comes up, and it can save a lot of time later if you're you can get that comment from the planner at the counter rather than getting that comment later during building permit plan check.
Absolutely.
And I think as Jeff mentioned earlier, kind of running by your concept or idea with the fire department can be really helpful, because it can be some of the fire department requirements can make an ADU suddenly kind of cost prohibitive potentially for people, because they can be pretty rigorous, like widening roads and making sure that they can support a 60,000 pound fire truck, and can get kind of costly. And other things too, in Fairfax. So I've had a number of people want to add decks to ADUs, and decks aren't actually the state law is silent on that sort of type of an amenity for an ADU. And so in Fairfax, then we have to rely on the underlying zoning district regulations for that type of amenity. And about most of our property in town, about 90% of it is what's called legal non-conforming. So it was established at a time period, and then later on the code changed and certain requirements were made that now the property cannot meet. So it's legal because it was previously created before the new requirements were established. So because of that, if we have a legal non-conforming property and it doesn't meet certain size or width requirements, and you want to add it like any type of structure, you need to get a discretionary approval from the planning commission.
So
So
if they wanted to add a deck, like that's not an ADU, so they do have to go through this discretionary process.
yes.
Right, right. Yeah, so it's interesting how that sometimes what seems simple on the front end can actually trigger some of these things, because ADUs are I mean, the state of California very consciously made them kind of a special protected class of residential construction in California that doesn't really exist in other forms. Whereas the rest of the building code, the rest of the planning code is still pretty much unchanged. So you will get these, I won't say they're conflicts, but these triggers where an ADU project, the ADU by itself is fine, but once you start looking at other improvements to the property, that can trigger other things that are require more oversight or more input from the city. So it's, as I think we've said before, we'll say it again before the end of the night. Good idea to talk about the totality of your project with the city to understand what may trigger, because that's going to help you make better decisions about what's possible and where you want to spend your money on your project.
Yeah, I have one other thing that comes up a lot for people in Mill Valley is regarding square footage and how we count square footage. So our code may change in the future, but the way it's written now, let's say you're, a few hundred feet or square feet, below your maximum allowed square footage on your property, and you have two projects you want to do. You want to do an ADU, and you want to do like a 300 square foot addition onto your house. And you want to do a by right ADU, right? So we allow you to do that, and it's not subject to our floor area maximum. But the trick is you have to do the addition first, because if you do the ADU first and you come in later to do the addition, then we do count that ADU square footage and your overall square footage for your property. So you wouldn't be able to do the addition later, but
Oh,
you can do it
interesting.
first, or you can do
Right.
it concurrently with the ADU. So we have a lot of those types of questions that come in, and it's a little wonky, but it is something that trips people up.
I've often said that sometimes it feels like planning code can be more complex than the tax code, because we get these pieces, these things. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of the ADU code, the way that the state passed it, and what it allowed for things to happen. And we've built. I think there was a notice recently that 100,000 ADUs have been built across California in the last 4 years. So huge for housing, huge for affordable housing. But you all have these rules that you have to apply equally everywhere, and so sometimes you get these situations where these new rules, they aren't in conflict, but they don't necessarily make sense outside of, well, these are the rules, these older rules still apply, we have to try to adapt them with these newer rules. And so talking with the city, understanding how phasing affects your property, when you look at your project as a homeowner, um, you know no home was ever completely done, but look at sort of the long term of what your goals are for that property, and plan that out. They may be end up being separate permits and separate parts of your project and spread out over years, but try and have an idea of what your goal is for the completion of that property, and plan it all holistically, because there are these kinds of things that you wouldn't think about that could trip you up 5 years down the road, that make your projects more expensive or harder, or possibly impossible, if you don't do them in the right order. All the more reason to talk to the city early. Let's see. This is a tough question, and hard to answer, and understand that can't be answered in detail, but can you give a ballpark of permit costs from planning and building's perspective? And for those at home, there tends to be kind of three size categories for ADUs: small, medium, and large, under 500 square feet, for small, 500 to 750 square feet for medium, and over 750 for large. And there tends to be three different sort of cost categories across those three size categories. So with that in mind, and every project is going to be different, cost of the project plays into the permit cost. Order of magnitude, how many thousands are we talking about? What does a permit look like for a small, medium, or large project in your jurisdiction?
I can answer that question for San Anselmo starting off just because Scott had us do some homework before this. So I know that for ADUs, I took a look at the history of permits in San Anselmo over the past couple of years. And for ADUs less than 500 square feet, for a building permit, it looked like the total fees were about a little under $5,000. For ADUs at that medium size, which is really the 500 square feet to about 750 square feet. The permits were about a little over 8,000 square feet, or 8,000 square feet, $8,000 in total for the fees. And then the large size was about a little under $10,000 total for all of the fees. And that includes fees for reviews by the fire department and all of the different building inspections and all that went into those.
That's great. Daisy, can I put you on the spot?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I do have I don't have it broken down completely the way that you're asking for, but I did talk to our building permit coordinator today about this. So for a sort of standard ADU that we get in Mill Valley, which is 799 square feet, and let's say valued at around $350,000, something like that, we would have a permit fees for that of $13,000 approximately. And 4,000 of that is school district fees. So if you have an ADU that's under 500 square feet, school district fees are waived. So that's one important thing to keep in mind. That's why one reason why the permit fees are so much lower for that category under 500 square feet. School district fees are generally, I think it's $5 a square foot in Mill Valley anyway. Overall, most building permit fees are based on the valuation of the project. So if you have a lower value construction project, let's say you're doing a conversion ADU, you're converting your garage rather than doing like a new construction structure, you'll have a much lower construction cost and your building permit fees will be a lot lower. And then I was just going to say for the other tiers of ADU, so if in addition to a building permit, if you were to need an ADU permit from the city, from planning, that would be an additional $1,500. And then if you need a design review, that's another $5,500.
Right. And Fairfax.
So I didn't have the chance to, I did not know that you were gonna ask us this. So I wasn't able to talk to our building official about he bases the building permit fees on its evaluation of the project. And I can speak to the planning fees. So we do have just like a sort of like a plan check fee, and that's $250 for any kind of ADU application. But then the building permit is just going to be based on how much you value your construction project.
Right.
So
And that tracks. I mean, that's, there are, when we talk about ADUs and costs and ability to build, I wish the state had actually aligned this before they passed the bill, but there's the permit cost size category, small, medium, and large. And as you say, under 500 square feet, school fees are typically waived, and that can drop a couple $1,000s off the permit. And then there's the cost of the permit based on size, and then there's the regulatory framework that uses a different size. So there's 800 square or under 800 square feet, which is was it category 1, Daisy? It's basically there's less oversight. It's easier to build. And so, when I talk to people about cost and size and permit and all of that, I often say, don't choose your project based on permit cost. Like, don't choose 490 square feet just to avoid paying that $4,000 or $5,000 in school fees, because you may be better off. You may rent for more, something that's 650 square feet, but be aware that those lines are there because you don't want to apply for a building permit for something that's 502 square feet or 756 square feet, because you end up paying the cost without getting the benefit of size. And that goes to, I think, the same for 800. If you're under 800, there are certain benefits that you get, or certain relaxations of the rules or protections of what you can do, the by right ADU. But if over 800 square feet makes sense from a use perspective, that extra bedroom, get that extra bathroom, it's worth investigating that option, because ultimately the permit costs are a fraction of what the construction costs are going to be, and in truth could be also only a much smaller fraction of what that ADU could earn in rent over the life of that ADU. And so part of it is looking at the immediate costs, the soft costs of the permit, but then also looking at the lifetime of that ADU, and what its potential return on investment could be for you as a rental, and trying to balance those. So this can get really confusing for a lot of folks. I understand that, and we haven't even talked about junior ADUs yet, which I think we probably should here in a second. But understand that there are some different measurements at play here in terms of regulatory framework versus cost for permit versus cost of construction, which we won't get into tonight. And I think that kind of does lead us into, and then there's this other kind of ADU, the junior ADU. Does anyone want to take a stab at describing how a junior is different from a regular ADU? Put you all on the spot on this one.
So a junior ADU is part of an existing house, or it's basically either carved out of it or attached to it, but it's part of an existing structure. So it's not a standalone separate building.
Right.
And it has to be 500 square feet or less. So that's
And in most places, I think, you guys have the two detached ADU possibilities, but for most places you're allowed a regular ADU and a junior ADU. So you can't have two rentable units in your property, but one of them is, and again, there are exceptions here as we know now, but for the junior, as you said, under 500 square feet, part of the existing house, and I think that's a really key point that often gets lost, is that you can't do an addition and then call and have it be a junior. It can come from an attached garage, but not from a detached garage. So existing residential structure, you can build a junior in it, and that allows you to also build a regular ADU of any kind. I think a lot of folks are building ADUs with family in mind, often aging parents, but with a junior ADU, you're allowed a connecting door between the junior and the regular house. Now, some of the cities we've spoken to, they also allow a connecting door for a regular ADU, but that's not as common. So if you wanted that pass through, a junior can also share the bathroom facilities of the regular house. So it can, sometimes if you're building with, the classic, the mother-in-law is the classic example. If you're building for aging parents or, adult kids who can't afford other places in Marin, a junior may be an option for you if your house is set up that way. And it can often be for less expense, because you don't necessarily have to build another bathroom, though they're always nice to have. And the kitchen facilities are often can be restricted. I always use the example, if you've been to IKEA and seen those sort of countertop kitchens, a kitchenette can qualify for a junior ADU. The other requirement is owner occupancy. So if you want to build a junior, you have to live either in the junior or in the main house, or in the detached ADU. You have to live on the property as an owner. You don't have that requirement for regular ADU. So, if you wanted to move to some other part, if you're living in Marin, I don't know where else you'd want to move to, but if you're want to move to some other part of the country, you could then rent the regular ADU out and the main house out. But if you wanted a junior, you'd have to live on the property. I think that's pretty much everything with the junior. A regular ADU can be under 500 square feet. It can have almost all the same characteristics of a junior. It's just not permitted as a junior. So it can be under 500 square feet. It can come from interior space. It can come from existing space, but it'll be registered as a regular ADU. So you have that option there. It can leave you open to future development for your house, or future use cases. So junior, something to consider. It often trips people up because it's like ADUs in the broader housing spectrum. It's different, but it's not that different. So it can be easy to confuse them. And as always, don't hesitate to contact us or contact the city if you need clarification on what's the best option for your use case. That's kind of what we do all day, is help homeowners figure out, does this make sense for them for what their goals are. Let's see. One thing we haven't talked about yet, and this is something that often gets left out of the ADU conversation, is what happens after construction. We focus on the permit, we focus on the construction, we focus on the budget, but within a year or two, that construction is going to be done. The ADU is going to be unlocked. Hopefully it'll be rented or used. Let's think about, you're going to be a landlord as a homeowner. You're going to be a landlord for many, many years to come. And often that kind of sneaks up on folks. And one thing that comes up, again, sort of after the fact, is renter protections. There are a number of renter protections statewide, but also individual jurisdictions can have some of their own renter protection rules. San Anselmo, you've got San Anselmo Fair Housing is a good organization to contact to find out about renter protections there. And then when I've spoken with different fair housing organizations, they've always given I said, what do homeowners need to know? And they almost always give us the same answer, which is Nolo Press has 3 books about being a landlord, the small town landlord, and your rights and responsibilities as a landlord in California, that every homeowner should be looking at. And I would suggest look at now, before you get into your ADU project, so you understand what that landlord relationship is going to be like, what you're going to be responsible for, and then you can figure out how to be a landlord effectively once the ADU is built. Is there anything else at the city level, people they should be talking to, different departments at the city, or different if there's online information that homeowners should consider about being a landlord in Mill Valley or San Anselmo or Fairfax?
The only thing I would add for Mill Valley is that we participate in a program called Home Match. And we do have information about that on Mill Valley's website. It's a program that connects potential landlords and tenants. And so that can be a great resource if you want to build an ADU and you'd like to be a landlord, but you're not sure kind of where to start. They do all the screening. They help to set up rental contracts. So it's a really great program.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Lindsay?
I'll just add that in case anyone is joining from San Anselmo tonight, I know that rental protections is a really hot button issue in our community right now. And regardless of which side you sit on the topic, just note that if you want to build an ADU on your property, or you want to live in an ADU on a property in San Anselmo, the rental protections that were recently adopted by the town council are not applicable to ADUs. So that's not really a part of this conversation when it comes to ADUs in San Anselmo.
Yeah, good to know.
Yeah, of course, there's still information about fair housing about as it relates to ADUs, and you can find that on our website.
Excellent. And that's something else that just reminded me of is one thing that often also doesn't get spoken about, I think, early enough, is that ADUs can't be used for short-term rentals. By state law, they're not allowed to be used for VRBO or Airbnb. I know we've had conversations with some homeowners that was sort of their financial plan, was to build an ADU and then put it up as a vacation rental. So there are there are ways for folks to. There's some new laws that have come out this last year that may be changing how ADUs can be used and bought and sold. And this is for future discussions, but something to think about, something to talk to your city councils about, is that there is a law, AB 1033, which would allow ADUs to be condoized, so they could be sold independently. And that is up to the cities to opt in or opt out. And this can have financing choices for families who want to do multi-generational housing and all buy in. But something to think of. We'll be having some more posts about that and what that could mean for the cities and for affordable housing here in the next month or so. But ADUs are really effective as an affordable housing option, and there are more options from financing and keeping that housing affordable over time is coming down the road. Anything as we're getting close to wrapping up, I see we've got 2 questions in the Q&A that haven't been answered. Okay, we've got, if you're not in the boundaries of a city, what would the cost be for Marin County? Well, we have a webinar coming up on Thursday with Marin County. And if you're not in the boundaries of the city, the permit costs will be different. If you're on well and septic, your potential construction costs are going to be very different. We're going to be talking about that in more detail on Thursday, but that'll be the teaser, is that if you're on well and septic, that's your absolute step 0 that you need to start with first, is figure out your well and septic situation if you're in the unincorporated county. If you're lucky enough to be on city water and sewer, it's a little bit easier, but well and septic is by far the biggest challenge, I think, for ADUs in an unincorporated county. And come back Thursday or email me, Scott at aducenter.org. If you have more questions, we're going to be talking about unincorporated issues on Thursday. ADUs, how do ADUs affect lot coverage? Does anybody want to grab this one?
I can answer this one and just start by saying that typically ADUs are exempt from lot coverage requirements per state law. So essentially they are excluded from the total count. Of course, if you have an existing ADU and you want to build an addition to your home that's separate, that addition does count towards your total, which is kind of what Daisy was alluding to before. So ADUs on their own do not count towards lot coverage, and that's the simple answer.
Yeah. Thank you. And then there is, can you tell us what is involved to get a retroactive junior ADU? So I'm gonna, Kim, I'm gonna guess that you have something that could be a junior ADU that wasn't permitted. And unpermitted ADUs is actually a good, interesting topic. And it really kind of depends on when it was done, how it was done, what documentation is there. And different cities have different pathways through getting your ADU permitted, your unpermitted ADU into permitted. It very short and simple. Most of the time it means bringing it up to current code, which can be a lot of retroactive work, a lot of retrofitting of, energy efficiency issues and windows and things like that. What I recommend is, if you have an unpermitted ADU and you want to bring it up to be a legal unit that you can rent easily without the liabilities of renting an unpermitted unit, which are very big, talk to your building department. But we start with the planning department, but probably 95% of that process is going to be within the building department, and they are best suited to walking you through what that process would look like. And it tends to be unique to every situation. But it's a good place to start, and they can help you understand what that might be. If it was built, in the 70s or something like that, I'll be blunt. It's going to be a lot of work to get it permitted. It's going to be, there's a lot has changed in the building code since the 70s or the 60s. So something to be aware of. Let's see. What are the height exceptions for an attached ADU? This can change by jurisdiction. We'll go to Lindsay at San Anselmo for the first answer.
Okay. So an attached ADU typically has a height limit in San Anselmo of 25 feet. If you want to go above that, you can seek a conditional use permit from the town, which is a planning permit, and you're required to get that planning permit approval from the planning commission before you can seek a building permit.
Right. Fairfax? Kara? Oh, you're,
There you go.
yeah, there you go.
So same height limit, 25 feet, and that would be a variance in Fairfax to exceed the height limit.
And a
So-
variance can be a pretty high bar. That can be a tricky permit to get.
So you need to go to the planning commission and request a discretionary approval, and specific variance findings need to be met. So that's what you were talking about. That can be hard to make.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Mill Valley, we have the 25-foot height limit for attached ADUs as well, and that's actually coming from state law. That's probably why we're all aligned on that one. We used to have a lower limit for our attached ADUs and then went up to 25 feet. So, and then if you exceed that, it's the design review process that I was discussing earlier.
All right. And then, okay, from Joe McGuire, we have if a 2-bedroom ADU is proposed that exceeds 800 square feet, plus or minus 1,000 square feet, what are the floor area and setback exemptions?
I can just start by saying in San Anselmo, you need to get a conditional use permit approval from the planning commission for a 2-bedroom ADU that exceeds a 2-bedroom unit ADU that exceeds that's about 1,000 square feet is fine. If you want to go above 1,000 square feet, you can go up to 1,200 square feet with a conditional use permit. Anything over that is not allowed in San Anselmo. So you wouldn't be able to get approval for that. But if you're at 1,000, building permit. If you're 12,000 or less, conditional use permit. Sorry for that confusion. And then the setbacks are just the regular 4-foot side and rear setbacks, and the FAR exemptions still apply.
Yeah, for in Mill Valley, if you have a 2-bedroom, 1,000 square foot ADU, the setbacks are still 4 feet. And what was the other question? The floor area exemptions. Oh, the floor area is counted towards the overall floor area on the parcel. So it's only the 800 square foot by right types of ADUs, 800 square feet or less, that do not count towards the overall floor area. So if you were proposing 1,000 square foot ADU, you would need to be able to accommodate that extra floor area on the parcel.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, Kara, Fairfax.
So in Fairfax, we allow a 1,200 square foot detached ADU. The side and rear setbacks must be 4 feet. We have a front setback of 10 feet. And if you wanted an exception to any of those, then it would be a discretionary approval from the planning commission.
Right.
Is there and the FAR, so Fairfax sort of has an interesting FAR policy where we will exclude one accessory dwelling unit from the floor area ratio. So that won't count towards your floor area ratio.
Okay. And then the last question, I think, probably for the evening here, for existing attached garage conversion ADU, will I be required to have the unit be all electric? I have a general answer, and this is kind of a building department question, but the general answer is it was the 2022 code. If the city doesn't have an all electric code adopted already, which some areas don't, you are allowed to use gas, but you still have to install all the circuits and the wiring as if it were all electric already. So my general advice is, well, depending on which jurisdiction you're in, you may not be required to make it all electric. It's typically the cheaper option to make it all electric simply because you have to do the work anyway. Anyone from the cities want to have more to add to that?
I'll just add for Mill Valley, we do not have that ordinance in place at this time.
It's coming. I think within the next code cycle or two, it probably will be all electric everywhere at a state level. Probably
So,
two code cycles is my guess.
sorry.
Yeah.
In Fairfax, we do have an all electric ordinance for a brand new building. But so that would be if it's a brand new construction ADU, but not if you're converting an existing building or part of a house or something like that.
Right. And I think that's an important distinction to make. And I think Marin County makes the unincorporated county makes this distinction very explicit in how they categorize their ADUs. But conversions, converted ADUs, accessory buildings that were garages or outbuildings or other parts of other structures that became an ADU often have a slightly different requirements, slightly less requirements sometimes, or slightly more options in terms of setbacks and footprints and things like that than a complete new build. And I'll just say from a cost perspective, conversions are not always the cheapest way to go, because often if you have to bring a much older structure, let's say 1930s era garage with no foundation up to current code, you're going to spend more than building from new. But conversions and new ADUs, new build ADUs, there can be some slight differences in the requirements. And so as you get closer to these projects, as you're thinking through what you want to do, um, you may be looking at, do I do a new detached, or do I convert the garage off the side of the house? My house was built in 1922. Those are the kinds of questions, as you get to the details of your projects, you want to be talking with the city planning, building, fire, us, to figure out what makes the most sense for your project budget and your goals. Because the closer you get, the more details you start to uncover about your project, the more that the different slight changes in the rules from one path versus another can have fairly significant cost implications for your total project. And before we wrap up, does anyone want to add anything that we haven't yet covered? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us. It's been great. And please, if you've got additional questions or things we didn't cover tonight, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. For your folks at the city, they're more than happy to talk to you about your ADU projects. Go to admarin.org and you can sign up for a consultation or get additional information. And it's been wonderful to be able to talk with all of you tonight. Thank you for all the panelists for being here and taking time out of their evenings.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So.